Okay. Good morning. Nice crowd here. Nice good work near with the crowd as well. Let me introduce myself. I'm Bharat. I studied engineering like 12 years back. Started as an engineer. I was in front end for a while, design, and I moved around startups. And at some point, I started doing more events, more hackathons, more tech talks, and I started writing developer documentation to help other engineers use our products, and eventually I moved into what we call developer advocacy or developer relations, whatever it call. There's multiple names for that right now. So yeah, that's about me. So today I'm gonna talk a little bit about developer documentation. A lot of you have somebody mentioned Nextjs at some point that they are working on. A lot of you must be using some developer tools, including any language, anything, whatever it is. There will be some documentation that you're gonna go through that helps you learn this. Anybody uses JavaScript? I think. Wow. Okay. Quite some crowd. So you must be going through. Hey, you want to know more about a function, for instance, a map function, or a certain functions, or certain, let's just say, parameters in a function. You need to know more about some of the details. Where do you guys go through? Can you give me some idea of what kind of a search do you do? Where do you go look for this information? MDN. MDN, yeah, MDN has become so popular for JavaScript. That's the place for JavaScript right now. Even though MDN is a Mozilla thing, which is there's no owner of JavaScript, but that's the developer documentation for JavaScript now. The documentation is so good that it has raised up to be the standard of what a developer documentation for JavaScript should be. That's the kind of documentation that I'm gonna focus on. That's primarily focused on a language, which is a much larger audience. But as you know, the target for something like JavaScript is a lot wider, meaning that anybody who's somewhere from 8th grade, 9th grade right now, who's learning to get into coding, starting to learn JavaScript, gonna go to MDN. Anybody who's in the 30 years in the field, who's getting to know what the newest ES6 features or ES7 features are coming up, what's in proposals are coming up, you can still go to it. Anybody who's somewhere in a QA who wants to check what features are available in which browsers, see what the errors could be, go to MDN. So the range of people that the developer documentation focuses on is pretty wide, especially for something like JavaScript. When you build your own developer documentation for whatever features you're building, APIs you're building, it may not be as wide, but it's still usually much wider than the other developers who are going to read your code. Usually, code is also you focus on making sure code is readable for others to focus on. So that's a little bit of introduction on developer documentation. Let me continue on the so today, this is what I'm planning to cover. I'm going to start with why we are doing this. What is the purpose of the documentation? What is it trying to solve? That sets the stage for the entire conversation. From there, I talk a little bit about our journey at Find, what we did, how did we go through, what are the struggles we faced. I don't dwell too much on it, but it gives you a sense of the ups and downs in our developer documentation journey. And then I'll go on to talk about what are the core principles that I believe are important when building a developer documentation. And then talk about what are the methods in which you can implement those core principles, make sure that your purpose is solved. And then I'll open the stage for questions. Sounds good? Okay. Um, okay. So the purpose, why do we build developer documentation? This is a nice EE alliteration here, but it still, clearly emphasizes what the reason is. First, we want to enable developers. We want to make sure it's easy for anybody to use your documentation. JavaScript is one of the popular, MDN documentation is one of the popular ones. But usually when you're building documentation for other companies, what ends up happening is you have a lot of APIs. For instance, have anybody used, for instance, Google APIs, Google Sheets API, Calendar APIs? Anybody used APIs in general here in this audience? Okay, small crowd. It's pretty good. It's good. Okay. So when you are using APIs, you pick a language, you use APIs, you want to integrate another system that already exists on, and then you want to build on top of it. You can build plugins for Google, or you can, for instance, an Android app, for instance, uses the Android core APIs in a way. We won't call them APIs like REST APIs, but it still uses the way to integrate with that system. So in all of this, developer documentation is focused on helping people build on top of your system that's already being built. That's the primary goal that you're going for. This is a next level of abstraction. That's, if you call it that way. In a way, you can say JavaScript also, another level of abstraction. I keep coming back to JavaScript because it's easier for the audience, I suppose, to know about it. So you have built certain things before engineer. There's a lot of engineering that has gone into building something, and you want the developers who are not part of the core team or involved in the development to build on top of it. So you expose certain endpoints, expose certain ways for them to build it, and you want to enable them to build those things. That's where the documentation comes into play, because people use those documentation to learn about how the system is built. They don't need to know more about like a lot about how it's built, but more on, hey, what are the things that's been exposed? What can I do with it? How can I use it? Those are the things people care for. So when you're starting to build developer documentation, that's the first thing you focus on. You want to enable them like as fast as you can. How to get your hello world program is the fastest you feel get a reward for getting your like learning a program. So in Python, it's a sprint hello world, super easy. You go to a introduction to Python, it says sprint hello world. I write it, I save it, I run Python my file.js, and you get a result. Feels good. Okay, you achieved something. Okay, and that enables more effort for the developers to continue proceeding forward. So you want to make sure there is a quick start available. Like how can you quickly start something, like 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds, whatever the size of complexity of the system that you're working with. You want to give them a quick reward on, hey, what is the fastest you can get something out of it? With the hello world equivalent of building an API, for instance, hey, how can you have a like a some kind of a scheduling app? You are trying to build a scheduling app in the calendar, Google calendars. You need to use APIs, but what is the boilerplate code I can give to you so that you can copy paste this and then run it, and it will show equal and basic things on the start. It's not going to give you everything, but it's a start for you to build on top of. The quickest, it is easy, you give them a start, it's easy for them to start building on top of it. That's one part. The other is give more examples are, hey, here are the ways you can integrate with those systems. The details in the API, as people are looking into, hey, how can I use these endpoints, giving all the parameter information, those enables them more faster. Searchability, this is, hey, somebody comes with a particular use case. Hey, I want to use your APIs, I want to use your system to build this particular thing. How easy it is for them to find those things in your system. That's another thing. It enables faster. I8 stock FAQs, again, when people are searching for, I'm struggling with this or I'm trying to do this, and the documentation is not covering all the edge cases, then you have FAQs which actually solves it. I8 is internationalization. Internationalization, which is about localizing the content to different languages. I think it focuses deeper on cultures and like the way people operate and stuff. But if most of the times when it's implemented, it talks about you implement it for different languages, so anybody from different places can still read your documentation, at least the basic parts. So again, this enables them to like get the quick start first, and once they start using and see value in it, it's easier for people to get deeper and deeper. Next is to educate people. Once people start using, let's just say JavaScript, you start saying hello world or Python, and then you want to build some things on it. You want to build you want to write a code that iterates through your student list array and then checks whose average mark is, whatever. You are looking for a particular thing. I want to help you. I want to educate you on what are the possibilities with the system, so that you can do what you want. You can do that with having clear guides on, hey, these are the ways you can get like do this. And use cases is another example of these are the usual situations people come to my API for, and you build those use cases, give them a clear journey on, this is where you start, this is what you do next, this is what you do next, this is what you do next. In the throughout this journey, they are learning something. They are not going to learn the entire system using this, but any of these pathways they're going to take. But every time they are taking a pathway, they are learning some parts of it, and that's necessary for them to learn the entire thing, and it enables them quickly to get the result. At the same time, it also teaches them a little more every time that they come for it. Visuals and video, there's a right now in the last, I would say 6, 7 to 8 years, there is a lot of YouTube focused developer tutorial content that's become super popular, and it's easy to consume. I've seen 6-hour YouTube videos talking about, hey, how to learn Selenium in QA or something like that, which has like 500,000 views. There's a lot of people are interested. You take it in your pace, but visual learning is a lot more easier for people. So I wouldn't say everybody, when I take a survey on it, people seems to be split equally 50-50 on roughly on some people actually like reading content because they can skim through it faster, whereas some people like visual content because it's a little more there's no reading cognitive load that comes up with it. So making sure that you provide video tutorials also really helps. Visuals, so like for instance, if you are trying to explain a really complex entity, complex system, showing some diagrams, some engineering diagrams, some any visual diagram on user flow diagram, any diagram that actually gives them a quick understanding of how the system works than reading through a bunch of things, that again gives them, oh, okay, this is how things work, let me go detail into it and see what parameters are used in which places. So the quick understanding visuals really help. Certification, actually, again, this is more of a gamification reward system, where you provide certification for your documentation, so that people feel like, hey, I'm good at this, here's the proof that I'm good at it. Case studies is, hey, this is comparable to use cases, but this focuses on more on an existing implementation. A case study for JavaScript is something like, hey, for take any library and see React.js, for instance, and see how React.js uses JavaScript features. That's, you pick a particular use case that's been built already, and then you do a study on it. This study again focus, it doesn't help people directly, but going through that study, people understand more about what is the better way to do it. The other is empower developers. You wanna, now we enable them to start, and then we educated them about the details, and then we empower them. Empower them implies that you wanna you wanna help them, or you wanna give the power for them to do very complex things and without your hand holding. Until this point, we are actually helping them in every single part. We When I mean we, I'm talking about the people who are building developer documentation. Yeah. So one is, you want to give detailed references. Another thing, another reason MDN is so popular is because even though it gives you a quick example in the start of the thing, if you go detail into it, you will see every parameter very clearly explained, so you know exactly what this is, what a particular function is expecting. The more details one of the documentation has, the more advanced people can actually use it. The other is advanced topics. Pick advanced topics, like for instance, promises is already a little bit of an advanced topic for JavaScript. There are async functions, which are a little advanced topic, which you may not need to use for a while when you use JavaScript. But if you have them available, do not show them immediately, because when you are enabling it, you may want to make it easier, but make sure it's available. And for people who want to do advanced things, they can go find it. And then you show best practices. Again, as people start building more with a particular tool, they want to know, or it helps them to know, what are the better practices, what is the right way to do this. And since you give them the choice, so that they don't have to hit the wall multiple times before getting to that point. Open source is another very powerful tool to empower people as well. It enables collaboration a lot as well. You open source some of the tools that you built. When it comes to documentation side, you can say, hey, I'm going to keep my documentation public, because technically it's public, so you can open source the whole documentation, let people contribute back to it. And as people contribute, you get feedback, and the people who are contributing are already very advanced users, who they understand the system, or at least they understand sections of the system, and they see faults in it, they see improvements in it, and they are ready to contribute. And these are some of the ways you can actually, yeah, help, enable them, educate and empower the developer system. So okay, this this is the rough. I'll actually open. Any questions so far? Nothing. Okay, good. Okay, so given that that's the context for why we have developed documentations, I'm gonna go on a little tangent here and explain a little bit about how our developer documentation has evolved. I'll give a little context on what we do. It's a much bigger thing system by itself, but have you guys heard of Shopify? Okay, do you guys know what Shopify does? Okay, that's good actually. Yeah. So it allows you to build e-commerce websites, and primarily enable all the sellers to put their products out there. Find started around like 10-15 years back, I think. They started to do the same thing, and over their journey, like the complex systems have become very way too complex. In the last, I would say, 4 years, before 4 years ago, at some point we started having a lot of microservices running in our system, and because there were more needs coming up, and we were trying to solve things in a better way, that the luxury that Shopify did not have, because since we are kind of reinventing the system, we can do it the proper way and make sure it's like the systems are built in a way that's scalable. And as the number of systems grow in the in our company, there are a lot of engineering teams, and everybody is building certain things, and they wanted to make sure it's usable by other teams inside. So they started writing some engineering documentations, API documentations for engineering. That's, since it's internal, people kept it simple, very basic, and if you have any doubts, you go to the desk there and then ask. That's how it was. And at some point, people are like, okay, at least let me put the API specs somewhere. And then Swagger UI came into play. Swagger UI is basically a simple API spec that in mostly used by engineers. Engineers write the spec and then it shows up in a good enough way. So it talks about all the parameters. It's a basic UI interface for exploring APIs, I would say. You can say the same API spec, you can send it to Postman. Have you guys heard of Postman? Okay. So you guys do know APIs actually. The Postman is a popular thing for using APIs. So Swagger UI is a framework that you can implement to get the UI for it doesn't have a backend, it just has a like a library. So we started with there, and then at some point it became the API specs were there, but since there are multiple systems doing multiple complex things, people didn't not everybody all around the company, not all the engineers understood what the systems offer. So they started writing some documentation on like why it is there, how it is there, some text around it, some text here and there. For instance, authentication, we use three levels of three different types of authentication. We are trying to depreciate a couple of them, OAuth being the popular one. There's a client-based authentication as well. Like people are implementing different of these authentication in different places for different reasons, and they started writing some content around explaining, hey, how does this work, what is the flow for OAuth, you need to get request for client credentials here, and then there's access, all that. So when that came into play, Swagger wasn't enough. Swagger is just for API specs. So and you don't want to keep multiple readme files, and also our repositories are private, so it wasn't easily accessible, and there's a whole security system on different engineers doesn't have access to all the repositories. So we started having Docusaurus. Docusaurus is a framework built by Facebook. You can write MD files, markdown files, just like in the README files, and then it converts it into a web page. It's basically, it uses MDX as a library in the behind the scenes. So MD files to HTML is what it's popular for, but it also provides a lot of functionalities around. Hey, how can you organize and structure your pages, and like the sidebars and navigation, all that stuff. Like a lot of features around it. So we started using Docusaurus at some point, and then but Docusaurus did not have what Swagger UI had. So when we tried to use Docusaurus for API documentation, it wasn't helpful. But like we tried to keep both parallelly and then run Swagger UI somewhere else. But then you cannot run APIs in Swagger UI. You can have Postman which runs it, but the Swagger UI itself is just the interface for it. Eventually, also the company kept growing. The company size became like somewhere like 80, 90, 100 to 800 people within the span of 2 years, and there are so many new things are popping up, like 12 different products are coming up. We have just launched like a headshot AI product, which talks about upload a bunch of pictures and then it gives you like a proper professional headshots. So there are so many the engineering team is exploring a lot, coming up with new products. All of these APIs are also coming up, and the main product that we were giving out, that started growing extensively as the customer base increased. Every feature that they're requesting for was built into it, and then it was built as a microservice, so the APIs are exposed. And our APIs for just the commerce platform, not all other products, the Shopify equivalent commerce platform is currently at somewhere around 630 APIs. We have 630 APIs and 161 webhook events. Do you guys know what webhook events are? Okay, some people. So I'll give a okay. Webhook events are basically, let's just say something happens in an interface in your system. Let's just say you go send a message in WhatsApp. The message, it's your client in your phone sends a like API or some kind of a like a WebSocket notification to the servers, and the Facebook servers like knows that, okay, this person sent this message, okay, and then the system is built in a way that, okay, which number is it sent to? I need to find that client and then send it back to the message. But whenever there's an event triggered, instead of using it as an API calls, there's a even you can build it in a more like a event-driven system. I think JavaScript default comes with a lot of event-driven systems because DOM is a event-driven system. Anybody who works with HTML's JavaScript related things? Okay, some people. So, if you know, there are on click is an event. On a on click on a button is an event. So that triggers an event in the system and it propagates through wherever it's needed. And then anybody's listening to that event can actually capture it. So, if I were to give a practical example, I would say, hey, you put some kind of a device that says, hey, whenever somebody crosses here, notify me, something like that. So but you can do that for any event that happens. And like you need to engineer that, but that's roughly a rough idea of what webhooks is. Webhooks is basically, instead of saying, okay, you same WhatsApp example, you want to know when you get a new message, but you are not WhatsApp. You are not the WhatsApp system. You are a plugin that's built on WhatsApp. Let's just say a business which wants to listen to customers and then respond to their queries. You are not actually WhatsApp engineering team, not their server. You don't have access to that. So what can you do? You can WhatsApp provides you APIs to find all the messages that somebody is sending you. So you can say, hey, somebody send me messages. Somebody send me messages. Somebody send me messages. You can keep asking, and WhatsApp will say no new messages, no new messages. You will keep asking. Let's just say at the rate of every 5 seconds, and that will go on for like 3 hours, and somebody sends a message. So there is so much unnecessary network call, and it's too much load for WhatsApp as well, and it's unnecessary for your system to be running as well. So instead, what you say is, hey, WhatsApp, inform me when there is somebody sends a message. That's a webhook subscription, and yeah, you can listen to it. And when WhatsApp does get a message, they'll send you and they'll call your API instead of you calling theirs. They'll call your API, and you can do whatever you with the data, and you can make API calls inside as well. So that's webhooks, and we have 161 events in that right now. So as this system really like started growing a lot, we had to come up with new ideas. There are new features, new models, and there are, as the documentation also had new challenges. So we started building our documentation, at least the API documentation, into Nextjs, because Docusaurus wasn't enough to hold that many APIs. And the kind of payload that we wanted to have, the playground that we want to enable people to do that, it wasn't providing it. So we created a Nextjs interface which simulates exactly the theme of Docusaurus, because so that the rest of the documentation is Docusaurus, so it doesn't have you feel there's a clear flow for users. We started doing that, and we spent a lot of time building that. And then with Next.js, we have went through a performance. Consistency is the design primarily, and that was easily taken care of. Performance was a little hard. There were some parts where we need to clean up. This is a little details. I don't think you guys would be too interested. We started with the monoc editor, but we went because the default syntax highlighter of Docusaurus involved a lot of divs, which with like 100 APIs in a single page, slowed down the page and stuff. Um, we also built a API in GraphQL Playground, so people can say try the API, give the credentials, and then immediately get the response there. So this is our current stack. It involves a bunch of things. I think Swagger is not there anymore. Webflow is a design tool. It's used by designers. Have you guys heard of Webflow? Anybody? Oh, nice. Okay, okay. So Webflow is a design tool like Photoshop or Sketch or the Figma, where people do design, but also it's super. It also, one, it's more developer friendly. It has CSS associated with it, and you can just deploy it somewhere to a web page. So there is no prototyping that's required for it. That's what Webflow primarily focus on. Designers work on it, comes to the server direct, like production directly, no coding activity work. I mean, end up somebody might change things here and there, but mostly not. So the landing page, we decided that it needs to be focused on attracting the right people, and there needs to be creativity on what is built. And so designers work on the landing page, so it uses Webflow. The Docusaurus is the guides and tutorials, all the heavy content focused things. How can you do things? Take the use cases, case studies, some of the explanation diagrams, all the content focused things that we still use Docusaurus. We might move to Nextjs, but still that's the current play right now, where we write Markdown files. Markdown is not already great for technical writers, but recently people are a lot more comfortable writing in Markdown. People write in Markdown, it gets converted to HTML. There is no, like, the syntax is more Markdown, but we use Docusaurus for that. Next.js, so this part is a little interesting. We don't really write all the actual API and GraphQL docs. We have a API specs and we have a template, and of course there's content associated with each parameters. But since we can take some of the components, keep it somewhere as an entity and reuse those things. So this is coming from an API spec directly from engineers. They are using Next.js to take the API spec, convert it into API docs and GraphQL docs. This also involves Playground. I haven't mentioned it, but now we are working on a trying to use Ghost. We explored Medium, we explored Docusaurus, we also explored Git based something I forgot. So we explored a bunch of those, and we have kindly decided that Ghost is the right platform for building blogs. What's blogs? It's comparable to guides that you write, but blogs are more particular and it reaches audience in the kind of audience and the kind of content that you end up focusing on in blogs is different. So Ghost we are gonna use for, yeah. So that's our current system. And okay, now back to the general idea of what do we know what the purpose is. Let me quickly uh, think about. We want to enable all the developers. We want to educate them with the correct information, and we want to empower them to do complex things. So how do we do this? These are the three core principles which helps us make sure we do that, because it's always good to keep that vision, keep that purpose in mind. Whatever activities we do, I think this generally applies with most of you are going to be building in tools, building systems, and when you are doing that, I think the as a general good practice, try to keep in mind the humans that's going to interact with that system. Sometimes there are very few. I heard somebody interested in DevOps, like a small segment of you will be interested in DevOps, and in that case, humans are not really interacting with the system. Systems are interacting with the system. But most of you otherwise are going to be building system, which is going to jump, maybe take multiple hops, but ends up at a human's hands. Some human is going to be involved at some point for building, using the system that you build. It's always good to keep that in mind. It's all remember who you're building it for, so that you end of the day you want to make sure that they get the right experience. They are the whatever you're trying to help them with, you want to provide them with that. So same here, I would say, when building documentation, developer documentation, it's always good to remember who are we trying to help, how are we trying to help them, what is our primary, what's the purpose, what's the clear purpose, which is why I keep reiterating we want to enable the developers. That's the simplest way of putting it. So three things: make it accessible, make your developer documentation accessible, make it consumable, and make it accurate. What is accessible? When people want to find it, they should find it. Like, however, there are multiple ways to achieve it, but when people are looking for something, they should find it. In fact, when people are looking for something similar, they should still look for, like, have a give, they should still find it. That's what accessibility is. And if meaning that, let's just say SEO is one of the bigger ones, where people are searching for, hey, what language to get started with? Python, JavaScript shows up. That's accessible. Like, what how can I build an app? Something, like which ways can I build an app of? Android shows up. There are, how can I integrate calendars? Google Calendar will show up on the top. Google is pretty dominant in that. So how, that's one part of it. SEO, where in search engines it is. Do you guys know what SEO is? Okay. So search engine optimization. So it helps with making sure it's accessible. Blogs is another one of the reasons blogs are good is for that as well. You get good SEOs when you write really, really particular content which people are going to ask for. How can I create this using this with this in right now in 2024? People will, that's the kind of searches people do, and you are making sure that you are getting there. You are, you give them what they're looking for there. That's one. Even within your system, forget about competing with other systems. If somebody says, hey, in find, how can I do this? They are clearly using that, and will they still be able to find it? That's super important. So that's SEO. Second is navigation. When somebody is in your system, how can they navigate to different places? Is it easy for them to find all the things that they're looking for? Is guides available? API reference available? If they are FAQs, is a support available? Is the general navigation? This is more of a UX thing, but also a little bit of a content thing. At end of the day, the purpose is make sure that they get what they want. You are enabling developers. Indexing, like how do we index the system? Search, have a search so that like a reasonably good search. I have seen a lot of people. I think recently, I think Algolia, one of the searches, have become really popular for documentations. But you want to make sure that when people actually search for it, do they in the top 5, 6 results inside the search of your documentation, they're getting what they want. If it's a actual text match search, that text might be used in 100, 500 different places, and you may not be knowing how to prioritize it. So there is a reasonable work that goes into building breadcrumbs for your documentation to make sure that the search is available. So that make sure that the content is accessible. Second is consumable. This is where I think writers, like tech writers, content writers role comes into play heavily, where the language is easy to consume, language is proper, and there is a clear narration to it. There is a story that they can follow. Okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, and then those things, logical flow of what comes after what, all like these. This makes it your documentation easy for people to go through. They won't feel jumping around in different places. They won't feel broken apart. They don't feel like there are multiple pieces they need to puzzle together. You are clear. This is the equivalent of you watching a movie and there isn't clear flow to the story. This happens, this happens. Yes, sometimes you take a detour, talk about something else, but you come back in a coherent way. So your documentation should give people the same feeling of, hey, I'm able to understand this clearly in a proper coherent manner. And yes, you will give them links to detour somewhere else, but make sure that tell them in a way that that's not necessary, this is optional, this is the flow you want to go through. Especially the quick start, the guides, it's super important that it's the flow is important. So language, narration, logical flow, syntax highlighting people underestimate a lot. Like when people are reading code, like especially in a documentation, it really helps to make sure it's consumable. Code consumability, it's about writing comments and making sure it's syntax highlighting comes with a lot of systems, but I've noticed that some of the developers, when they write documentation, they forget about the syntax highlighting. So again, good comments on the right places, proper variable naming. This talks about code in general. Yeah, that's a code copy, but syntax highlighting, code copy. This is something I think a lot of you will be involved in on writing code. Make sure that your code is readable, because this is something a mentor told me, I think a few years back on. Who do you think we write code for? Why do we write software? Why do we write code? This JavaScript or Python? Anybody? Like, who's our target audience for the code? Developers. Yeah, other humans. The code is built for humans. Even though the computer ends up converting it to binary language at some point, it's written for humans to read. So make sure it's readable in the sense that the formatting, the variable naming, proper comments if it's a complex system. If it's too complex, break it down into multiple modules. That's a good practice with coding. That's a different talk by itself. But in general, at least the code snippets that comes up in the documentation should be should follow them all much more strictly than I would say for engineering. If you work with a bunch of engineers in a small company, like 3, 4 people, and all of them are very expert engineers, they can understand your code, then you can get away with a lot more. And they'll be like, oh, it's okay. Good practice is less important. We want speed first. In which case, yeah, there's a compromise you're taking. But tomorrow, if a junior engineer comes there and tries to look at it, what the hell? I don't understand anything out of the system. That comes into play. But that's a different conversation. But I want to emphasize that when it comes to documentation, the code should be very clear to understand, because you are dealing with all ranges of developers. So when they read it, they should clearly notice it. The next is, it should be accurate. Every content that you put out is what you are actually representing the engineering systems that's been built out there. This is like, if the user manual of a car is not accurate, it's going to be trouble. Your engine is going to break, the brakes are not going to work, something's going to be in trouble. So this is like a user manual, car user manual equivalent for engineering system. So you need to make sure it's accurate. and which means you need to make sure whenever there's an update to the system, you go back and check what it has affected and may change to the documentation. Frequent updates, make sure that any update that comes, it's very important that you update the documentation as well. Go check with sit with the engineers and make sure that this is working. Get test it yourself, act as an external engineer and try to simulate it and see if the system is still valid. Is there any bugs in the system? There should be engineering reviews on any code related changes that goes to the any documentation, honestly, about the architecture might change at some point. And if as a technical writer or a content writer or somebody else is changing that, it may not be exactly the same as what the engineering system has built. So you need to make sure there are reviews in play and get public feedback. When you do make changes, especially bigger changes, release it to some public people, or internal, like some kind of a beta release, or show it to some people. Send the document to like a link, backlink to someone and say, see, this is the link we have that the problem we are facing, yada yada, and then get a feedback on what do they think. Hey, is it explainable? Is it easy for them to consume it? Is the flow correct? Are they understanding the code? All the things that we care for, is it, feedback applies in general, but make sure accuracy is something that's also equally important. So to get a good developer documentation, we care for accessibility. It's accessible to everybody. Consumability, meaning that it's consumable, it's easy to take, it's easy to go through content. And third, accuracy. It needs to be correct. There should not be any flaws in the system. Any questions on this subject so far? Okay. So what methods can we use to implement this in developer documentation? Right now, this is the system that's been working most of the successful companies that I've noticed. There are three types of people. Okay, that's the slide is a little okay. I'll explain what this is. It's the slide is a little shortened. I think it's engineers has come down. That's okay. So there are three kinds of people working that's collaborating or contributing back to the documentation in any. This is the newer system I have noticed work, which is there is engineers who ensure the technical correctness, meaning that the accuracy that I mentioned. What is the code that works? What is the architecture that's correct? Which systems are connected to each other? What is the right way to use our APIs? What is the right way to use our systems? That should the technical correctness should come from engineers. Engineers take responsibility of it because they are the ones who built it. They know what is the best way to use that system. Like car engineer telling how to drive the car, like, or at least how to press the buttons correctly. And then there is language correctness that comes from tech writers. A lot of companies have, yeah, all these three segment of people. Tech writers primarily focus on the narration flow, the part which I'm talking about, consumability, primarily except for the code part and the syntax highlighting part, the language, narration, logic flow, these are all heavily contributed by the technical writers. The engineers contribute to the accuracy primarily. And then there is a developer relations, developer advocacy team that's been built, which is this kind of a limbo team, which is trying to do everything. That's what I noticed in still mid-sized companies. In bigger companies like Google, Microsoft, AWS has a lot of. Have you guys come across AWS? Okay, so AWS has a lot of documentation because they have a lot of machines that you can access to use Kubernetes or all those things, and they have a very extensive DevRel team, and they focus on customer engagement. Even inside DevRel team, they have focus on support, documentation, engineering. So this is where this DevRel team comes into play. They collaborate between tech writers who are responsible for the content or to get it reviewed from them, engineers who are making sure that the technical correctness is right, and then DevRel ends up taking the ownership of developer documentation. Ownership, and there's a thing called core principles that comes in. This core principles that I mentioned is a responsibility of DevRels. But it's a collaborative effort between tech writers, developers, and engineers and DevRels. Yeah. So that's the method that based on the studies that I've done, that working, and we also have implemented the similar system. We have tech writers, we have different engineers, and DevRels go between them, jumping and poking around and making sure that things are perfect. And then like we are also involving GenA in the system. For instance, Cursor. Have you guys heard of Cursor, the first logo? So Cursor is a AI that's popular these days for code. Hello. Yeah. Writing code. Cursor AI is popular. And so we are encouraging developers to use Cursor AI to like get a some sense of a API spec from the functions methods itself of the code. So we are using that GitHub. That's GitHub Copilot. That's another again Gen AI tool that's focused on coding. From what I hear, just Cursor is still more popular. So we are encouraging people, and we are trying to see how much we can use to get content generated from the code itself. I would say it's still a work in progress. We haven't productionized any of this yet. Suppose and then there is the other end, which is ChatGPT, Gemini, those kind of LLM text-based models, which again helps with content writers, tech writers on creating the content. There is a thorough review that goes through it. It ends up, I would say, like at least when you want to get a skeleton, when you want to get some structure of the content, or if you have keywords you wanted to fill it up, people like this kind of LLM tools have been Gen AI tools have been helpful. But it still goes through a thorough process, because what ends up happening is the content created by the LLMs are usually content based on what's available to the training model that's built on, and we are trying to create new content. We are the ones who are the creating content that's going to be that the AI is going to be trained on. So end of the day, so which means there is a the accuracy goes for a toss. A lot of there's a lot of delusions here and there, but it still like saves up some time, and it increases our productivity for sure. Like when it comes to some of the smaller parts, hey, expand this one line into like two lines, something like that. Or even though there's a thorough review that happens end of the day, it does help increase the speed in which we can do things. The other is something like that's one of our co-pilots, which is more like a support chatbot kind of a thing, where you feed the entire documentation, some of the exposable internal engineering documentation as well, to the chatbot LLM. And then now when people come and ask for questions on, hey, like how do I do this, instead of searching, navigating, there's other bunch of things we went through. Instead of that, they can just ask the chatbot, I want to build this, how can I do this? And then based on the training data that it has, which is primarily focused on actually building those, it actually gives them a like a customized solution to some extent, to a reasonable degree, based on the quality of the content that you have in your documentation. The better the LLM's responses. And for most of the beginner use cases, it's been pretty successful. That we've had a lot more success with the kind of a chatbot equivalent. It reduces our support queries as well, because engineers come back and say, hey, I don't know how to do this. Or people go back to other third like a forums out there and say, hey, they search in Google, they don't find it, go to Stack Overflow, they go to our public forums, and then they start questioning there. And that's a lot more human involvement. And if we have people who can help them with it, it's great. But with the limited amount of support system we have, we have a team of I think 8-10 people support, which is handling all the products, engineering, everything. So it really helps us like cut down most of the noise, most of the requests that's coming in, they get resolved before it gets to a human in the first place. So yeah, that's one of the, like, these are some of the places where I have noticed Gen AI involvement. um and then the other thing is, make sure that this again goes back to accuracy in general. We have some quality checks in play right now, which ensures that there is a review process, regardless of what it is, code, content, like a diagram, everything goes through a review process. Somebody who knows the system, some like, even if you are a senior person in the team, you want it reviewed by anybody who is available, even a junior or somebody, because you want, the more eyes there are on anything, the likely that some of the things don't get missed in general. Even if it could be a silly spelling mistake in one of your code or your content, and your quality and accuracy, everything else might be right, and you might miss that. More eyes, the better, making sure that the probability of you having errors in your system is lesser. So we have review process. We have a QA team. We have 1 or 2 people working right now who is actively making sure that the APIs are working. They are writing some automation code to make sure that the APIs are still functional, or because some of the APIs might be down at some points. And they do a sanity check on the content. Is it like good? All the backlinks correct? All the linking correct? Half of them are done through automation. Half of them are manually done, because you want to make sure, especially new things coming up, you want to make sure that it's the basic sanity of it is good. The basic content is consumable. Uh, the other is whale.sh. This is something that recently started exploring. This is a not a this is a more of a NLP based simpler version of grammar check. It does a basic grammar check and also some of the proper nouns and all the things. You can customize it with some configurations. That's whale.sh is the actual link web page itself. You can go look it up. It's so you can it's a library that comes which helps you with it. I found this to be a lot more reliable than some of the Gen AI tools that we are trying to automate. We couldn't Gen AI tool still goes through a thorough review. Whale, for instance, a lot more simple NLP based checks are predictable when it comes to the result that I'm looking for. So when somebody writes a content and this check says correct, then I'm expecting 99% or 95% sure that it is correct. Like that the grammar is at least correct. The content might be, the story might be wrong. The accuracy might not be there, but at least the grammar and the English checks are done. That's done by this. So these are the quality checks that we have. So yeah, so that kind of concludes my talk. I'm gonna reiterate on all the, I've spoken about a lot of things. There's a lot to consume in a short amount of time. I am gonna roughly go through all the things that I've gone through today. One is the purpose of why we build documentation is to enable, educate, and empower developers. We want to help them. That's the purpose of our documentation. How do we do this? Using these principles. The doc should be accessible, consumable, and accurate. And what are the methods we implement to make sure that the principles are taken care of? Is by we enable more collaboration, use tooling, could be Gen AI, some of the automation pipelines, and then we have some quality checks. That's it. That's my talk. Anybody, any questions regarding the talk, DevRel in general, what we do, anything? So, okay, let me open up the crowd a little bit. So, you guys mentioned MDN docs. Who else? Who uses MDN docs here? Who has seen MDN docs? Okay, what have you used it for instance? You have mics, yeah. Sorry? MDN link, yeah. What have you used MDN links for? For the libraries, for the React framework, basically. React frameworks. Yeah. Okay. What framework were you looking for particularly?
Like when I was building a application web app, I checked like MDN docs for the web application, like for hooks basically.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Did you find what you're looking for?
Sorry.
Did you find what you're looking for?
Yeah.
What library were you looking for particularly?
I was looking for React basically, and actually, yeah, that helped me. Like I was finding a solution over there, and it actually helped me out.
So you went for a particular, like you faced an issue with React and we
Yeah.
went to look for it particularly.
I actually found I basically while creating any app before going to Stack Overflow or something, I prefer to read docs in
Nice.
spite of that. So
I
the
respect
thing
that.
I was
That's nice. Yeah, I respect the fact that you go to docs first and then before going to, yeah.
so yeah, I'll tell ki like everything is available on docs itself. So before going anywhere, you should come to docs and like go through that.
Yeah.
That will help.
That's nice. Yeah, that's good. I'm happy to hear that actually, because a good docs particularly will give you everything that you need before going to forums out there. Forums do help some situations, unique cases. But like one of the things I don't think I touched today is you a good docs also touches on the common error codes that you face. Or and if you notice, some of the systems that's recently built has clear error codes. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for the patience. It took longer than I expected. Have a nice day, all.